What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Monday edition of Back Your Play with Q. I'm your host, Rich Quinones. We've got wild card weekend almost in the books. Got Dallas and Tampa later tonight. Crazy games abound, but we know that the New York Football Giants, fresh off their road win against the Minnesota Vikings Sunday in the wild card, will travel right down the turnpike to down 95 to take on the Philadelphia Eagles. Talk a little more about it. Does a great job on covering the Philadelphia Eagles, managing editor of the Eagles Wire, my guy, Glenn Erby. Follow him at The Cover 2 NFL. And look at this, trimmed up the beard, all ready to go. Looking good on a Monday, my friend. How are you?
Good, Rich. How are you? It took me 10 minutes too, man. Not an hour in the barbershop, 10 minutes. So
there you go. Now, let me ask you, do you bick it every day or what?
Yeah, I go down and down like that, but definitely every day.
I like old school. See, that's good. You got to keep up. I grow the playoff beard, man. I kind of look like a maybe like a Al Pacino, Carlito's way. I just let it grow a little bit.
I like it.
Thank you. All right, let's get into this. So we know it's set next weekend. Giants and the Eagles don't meet for the third time. It's been a house of horrors for my Giants over the years, not only playing against the Philadelphia Eagles, but having to go to Lincoln Financial Field. They haven't won there in close to a decade. I think they're 4-16 overall in their last 20 against the Eagles. We can get into those numbers. Let's start with Philadelphia. Injury-wise, let me throw out a couple of names. Lane Johnson, Jalen Hurts. If we were to kind of talk about where they're at injury-wise, what kind of percentage? I mean, we know they're going to be out there come Saturday night, but give us a little update on those two players.
Both are probably about 85-90%. They're going to go. Lane Johnson let it be known this week that he'll definitely need surgery for his abdominal injury, but he's still going to play. Hurts needed the bye week. He appreciated it, but he's still going to play. So both guys are going to play in pain, but they're going to show up.
I two things, and you tell me if I'm out of bounds here. I get the sense Sirianni and the Eagles, they're going to be somewhat coy about Jalen Hurts' health. And it's not going to shock me if after the year, let's just say they lose Saturday, they lose in the NFC Championship, what have you, and the season ends, that Jalen's going to have a little surgery to, clean out the show. I mean, I almost get that sense. Am I off base there?
No, not at all. I mean, I think when he got hurt, you heard the word 2 weeks and things of that nature. But I think still up until the point of last week, he had just started throwing. He was still feeling some discomfort. So we can call it a shoulder sprain. We can call it a lot of things. But you heard some things about it being a collarbone when it first initially happened, and you heard several different things. So we'll see what the actual diagnosis is once the season is over. But without a doubt, he's in pain, and I'm certain he suffered a significant injury.
And that's why I also had this conversation over the last several weeks, and even with Giant fans on social, where, look, don't read into too much about the Giants backups playing the Eagles that last game of the season, because Sirianni was not going to throw out all these different looks with Jalen Hurts. They were not going to run him RPO wise. They were not going to put him in harm's way. Saturday, let's talk a little bit about what the Eagles can do offensively against that Giant defense. Do you foresee a scenario where, you're going to just peel back the curtain and we'll see a lot more RPOs with Jalen Hurts, or do you believe they'll come out firing and test that Giants secondary early on?
I think that the latter. I think they'll come out firing. I think regardless of the shoulder, they feel like they got two alpha males at wide receiver. They feel like they got a top 3 tight end and Goddard. So from that situation, regardless of what they want to do in terms of the running game and the RPO, they're going to test the Giants corners, safeties early on to see what's happening. If they withstand it, then you may see them transition back to a run first approach. But if they can't, then it's bombs away.
Listen, we know one thing. Miles Sanders has had some big games against the Giants. Boston Scott he's a giant killer. He's like what Dave Maggett used to be for the Giants against the Philadelphia Eagles back in the day with that reference. I think after watching yesterday, so let's get into yesterday for a moment, then we'll get into Saturday's game a little more. We know it's a knee-jerk reaction when we watch something, right? And it just amazed me that when you listen to certain talking heads and whatnot, I still believe they don't buy into what Daniel Jones has done. Now, I've gone on the record of saying this, Glenn. I was not sold fully on Daniel Jones because I was just a staunch supporter and fan of Eli Manning. So after 15, 16 years, it's like, all right, I'm going to invite some stranger into my house. You got to win me over a little bit, right? So he's done that, though, especially early on with his legs, the toughness. The game against Jacksonville really showed me something. We saw what he was able to do later on in the season. He's cut down the turnovers. I went on the record saying he was going to have 65 plus yards in that game yesterday. That was the X factor, his legs. So when you scout Daniel Jones, when you saw what they just did offensively, where I think they only had one series where they had a punt, they went up and down the field against Minnesota. Where are you at with Daniel Jones is the type of rhythm that he's in right now going into this game Saturday night against the Eagles?
I think from an athletic standpoint and from a skill standpoint, it would kind of be like looking in the mirror. So is Jones the kind of athlete that Jalen Hurts is? No, but we've seen him take the ball 60 yards against the Eagles. We've seen him keep the ball. So I think from that standpoint, he's had their attention a long time ago. So Sunday did nothing to sway or determine how they're going to prepare for him. You're going to see them come off the edges hard, but you're going to also see them prepare for him as a runner. I think they prefer for him to beat them with his legs and with his arms, but I think they're prepared for both things.
I think overall talent, Jalen Hurts is more talented quarterback because more playmaker, so to speak, but natural throw of the football, Daniel Jones is the better quarterback when it comes to that. I'll debate people that all day long. And I think you got a new wrinkle now. So yes, are the Eagles going to sit here? We're going to stack the box. We're going to try to make you beat us. Quick hitches, slants. We'll take away Saquon, who only had 9 carries, over 100 total yards, though, catching the ball out of the backfield. I think if they do that early, the Giants might struggle because against superior DBs, secondary, these guys have had a tough time kind of getting separation. I mean, they're nice receivers. Don't get me wrong. Hodgins and Slayton, who, had the big drop yesterday, that game would have been over. And then Richie James, they've been serviceable. But I can foresee the Eagles, defensively kind of stacking a box and saying, all right, let's see if number 8 can beat us.
Certainly. I think with having C.J. Gardner-Johnson back in the lineup, you're surely to get that. If we get Avonte Maddox back, we'll know in a few days in terms of his toe. But if he's back, then you'll definitely get a situation where they're going to try to take away Saquon and make those other guys beat him. Now, if you have a situation where Maddox is not back, then a guy like Richie James and those other guys, they can give me some concern in the slot because at that point you'll have more zone coverage than man-to-man. So I think over the next few days, we'll try to figure it out. But what you're not going to have is Saquon Barkley go off whatsoever. So it'll be a situation where it'll be on Daniel Jones and those other guys to win that game on Saturday night.
Which I believe means they're going to roll him out a lot and get him moving with his legs. That's because you're right. The film, right? These two teams, they're divisional opponents. They understand each other. This is their third meeting. I think there's something to be said about that. That first meeting, you saw the disparity in talent. I mean, listen, I joke and I go off a little bit here and there, but I know exactly what the Eagles are. The Eagles are arguably, when healthy, one of the best teams, if not the best team in the NFL. I mean, it's just when they made the run early on in the season before they had a little hiccup. I don't know if the Giants are going to try to take a game plan away from what, from that Washington game where Washington was able to run against the Philadelphia Eagles. I think that was kind of an aberration. I'm wondering, though, when you look at offensively with the Giants, do you think the Eagles will be a little more aggressive when they get them in 3rd and long to kind of blitz, to send the house a little bit? Because Neal played well. Thomas, we know, is an all-world tackle. But other than that, the Giants' offensive line can be shaky, has been shaky.
But I think without a doubt, I think you'll see Josh Sweat back. You have Robert Quinn back. So I think, Jonathan Gannon is going to send guys in waves. I think you're going to see Fletcher Cox, all those guys play about 25, 35 snaps, depending on how many total snaps they play on defense. But I think you'll see a situation where they come off the edges and waves and they'll try to disrupt things from a pressure standpoint. It's in similar fashion to the way Wink Martindale did things yesterday. So in terms, I think they had 21 pressures on the Vikings and Kirk Cousins, 14 hits, something like that. So I think you'll see you'll see mirror images of the same defense.
The difference is with Wink, it's feast or famine, right? And they did a hell of a job. Jefferson had a couple catches early on. They shut him out. That's why it was so important. Remember now, Adoree Jackson and McKinney were not available for those games against Eagles. So that changes the complexion of the secondary. I think Lawrence, all world, all pro, he clogs that middle. It's amazing how Wink can kind of scheme it where Lawrence can get a one-on-one matchup. And I think that's kind of going to be the difference. My concern, though, is when you blitz like that, you do leave some of these guys soft coverage on an island, so to speak. AJ Brown wins 50-50 balls. He's a friggin' beast. Smith, great route runner, makes the hard catches as well. But then the tight end. And historically, the Giants have always had problems covering the Eagles tight ends. The Giants have always had problems historically covering tight ends. Look what just happened the other day. So do you believe that the X factor could be Dallas Goedert in this game?
No, I think without a doubt. I think you saw yesterday those guys played man. They played some man with the Dory Jackson and Justin Jefferson, but I think in certain routes you're shooting 2 or 3 people around him. So I think you'll see the same thing. So it'll be a pick your poison type of thing. You can try to take AJ and Devontae Smith away. Cool, then you're going to get a ton of Goddard. If you try to take Goddard away in the middle, then you're going to get a ton of those guys. So we'll figure out early on and often who it's going to be, but someone's going to get a one-on-one matchup, and that someone is able to win that matchup if Hurts is not pressured and blitz right away.
Monday edition of BYP Back Here Play with Q. Rich Quinones here. Glenn Erby joining us for a couple of moments at the cover. To NFL managing editor of the Eagles Wire USA Today, and also a member of PFWA Writers. Does a great job covering the birds, tweeting out, give you some wonderful insight as well. So the year that Hurts has had, right? If he doesn't get hurt, we can debate MVP of the National Football League. Who's under more pressure in this game? Is it Jalen Hurts or is it Nick Sirianni?
Hurts without a doubt. I think you're talking about a contract. I think you're talking about, regardless of the season that he's had, there's still this big game stigma or big game reputation that's followed him since his time at Alabama and Oklahoma. So without a doubt, the last time you saw him in the playoffs, he looked, like a deer in the headlights against the Buccaneers. Sirianni is proof that he can coach, that he's a few weeks away from starting his own coaching tree. So without a doubt, it'd be the quarterback. They have a top 10 pick. If the quarterback, for some reason, all of a sudden forgot how to play, they could get a new quarterback. So I think it'd be on the quarterback to get his contract, to show that he's the face of the franchise. All the pressure's on him.
You mentioned the coaching, right? So you got to put the players in the best position to make plays. Again, I was having this debate earlier today. I believe that, and it happens in every Sunday and it happens in the playoffs, and you've covered the league long enough, you know this. Teams get punched in the mouth. You have to be able to overcome adversity. You have to be able to weather the early storm. Would it behoove the Eagles to kind of come out and sling it around and really just put the Giants, back them in a corner, try to go for that early knockout blow? And the reason I say that is because the one thing we've learned about New York is they want to make it an ugly game, grind it out. If they're down 3, 7, 10 in the fourth quarter, that's exactly where they want you. That's exactly how they win games, these close games. It's never aesthetically pleasing on the eyes. It's never sexy. It's always ugly. I get the sense, though, if the Eagles try to force the issue and try to go for that knockout kill early, I think if it doesn't go to plan, you're at home, you're the number 1 seed, playoff expectations, Super Bowl aspirations. What do? You start to tighten up a little bit. Can you see that type of scenario? And if that's the case, what do the Eagles need to do to avoid that?
No, I think you're completely correct. I think at this point it's a tournament, it's one and done. So we're talking college basketball, college football scenarios at this point. So
Yeah.
I think it's about getting back to being efficient offensively, getting back to playing with pace, the things you saw earlier in the year. So regardless, again, if it's an aerial assault or if it's a grounded pound, what they want to do is be physical up front, be dominant, be explosive. You want to get back to explosive plays on both sides of the ball. Now, I think Jalen Hurts and his running ability played a huge part in those explosive plays. So we'll see how he feels about playing that way, and we'll see how they feel about utilizing in that manner. But in terms of how they want to come out, I think they want to come out. You're not necessarily going to knock a team that you've played out. You're not going to knock them out with, 2 haymakers, but you definitely want to be dominant. You want to send a message to them, to the 49ers and to whoever else is watching.
Is the whole adage, it's hard to beat a team 3 times in one season. I know we've said it in nauseum. We know what the stats and the records are. But does that carry any weight with you?
No, without a doubt. I think if you played sports, if you watched it long enough, great. You swept the Giants in the regular season. If they beat you at home in the divisional, what did those other 2 matter? So I think it carries weight. I think it's important. I think it's something both teams will be pondering as the days and the game comes up.
I know the line right now at open at 7. I mean, I get that it's Monday, but gut tells you leaning towards the Eagles in this one. How do you see it playing out? I get it. I know it's only Monday. Still got to go through practice. Still got to get the final injury report. But are you leaning one direction or another?
No, I mean, I'm leaning towards the Eagles. I think, the only thing that could give you pause was, like you said, that first matchup. And I think both matchups, Adoree Jackson nor Leonard Williams played. So it kind of changes the dynamic. But I think from a personnel standpoint, from the quality of the teams, from the Eagles being in the playoffs last year, a lot of those guys have that experience. I think you have to lean towards them. They want to send a message. They have all pros. They have guys that feel like they were shunned for all pros. So I think you'll get a different team come Saturday night.
And how about this? They beat the Giants and say Dallas wins later tonight. And then Dallas beats San Francisco. You might have a divisional matchup with an NFC East foe, right? Arrive on the Giants and then set up for an NFC championship against the Dallas Cowboys. Before I let you get out of here, what did you make of what transpired over the weekend? I mean, these games were ridiculously entertaining, right? I think it also proves and shows that some of these great teams, they get a little nervous. They have some mistakes. My takeaway, Chargers spit the bit, right? I had the Chargers in Minnesota for my Super Bowl participants. And I'll say this, as an unabashed Giant fan who does this for a living, but tries to be, for the most part, objective, I had no problem what happened yesterday. The Chargers cost me a couple units. I'm a little pissed off with them. But I thought San Francisco, I just went, I knew that they were going to separate themselves against Seattle. Cincinnati, I think a bounce of the ball here. I was a little shocked they didn't try to run it. Baltimore, Miami hung around, and then we'll get into tonight's game in a moment. But what did you think? What was your takeaway over the weekend?
I think you saw some exciting games, and I think in every game that had a winner, you saw a good fourth quarterback play as well. So I think it'll be a situation where the quarterbacks get paid the big bucks, and you saw why the quarterbacks get paid the big bucks. So we can speak all day about Josh Allen and his turnover problem, but when he needed to make big throws, and Joe Burrow, those other guys, they made those throws. So I think that's what you learned from it. Daniel Jones himself, he'll get talked about all week because of the quarterback play, and that'll be something to watch this evening as well.
I was shocked that Baltimore didn't try to run that running back last night. And then he comes on after fact and he calls out the play calling and says, we would have won if Lamar was there. And Lamar doesn't even show up. And I said this 2-3 weeks ago. People don't want to hear it. Lamar Jackson, he's out. Him at Baltimore, that marriage is done.
I mean, I think from their standpoint, if you're smart, you franchise him and you trade him and you kind of rebuild. But I'm not sure from the way they operate that you can give him the money that he wants and still maintain that level of excellence. So that'll be something to watch. But I think, coaches outthink themselves. Even a coach like Harbaugh thinks himself when you have a hard-nosed running back like that, give him the ball 1 or 2 times and see what happens. But, those things happen and they'll go from there.
I want to get your thoughts on tonight's game. But lastly, on the Giants and Eagles, before I let you get out here, give me one scenario that troubles you where you say, hey, if this happens, the Eagles, they're going to be in trouble here, man. They're going to be a dogfight. And then give me the opposite of that. Give me something where you're like, and you know what? Here's the path to victory. If they do this, it should be an easy win.
I think both situations center around Lane Johnson. So, we have the abdominal situation. He has to have surgery. He's going to play through pain. When he's in the lineup, they're nearly unbeatable. He could play one-on-one. He's a dominant force. So I think it's a situation where if he's in the game and everyone's clicking, you'll see a situation where the Eagles can run away. If the right tackle goes out, it becomes a different ball game, and it could become a feast or famine type situation for guys like Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, and those guys. So I think the right tackle will be something to watch from the get-go.
Good stuff. All right. How about tonight? The news came out, Harbaugh's going back to Michigan, which I guess if you're McCarthy, maybe that's a good thing to some extent. I thought they were going to make a push. Everyone's saying Sean Payton. Well, you got to give up a lot if you're still trying to get Sean Payton. Dallas Cowboys still have to play the game, but you got Tampa, you got Brady, maybe a swan song, maybe his last game in the NFL, maybe his last game with Tampa Bay, and then you got Dak and the Dallas Cowboys leaking a little bit of oil. So what's your play in this one?
That's a tough one. I mean, the Cowboys are the better team. They're the better team on both sides of the ball, but they're terrible on the road in the postseason. And then you're talking about Tom Brady. So it'd be something to watch from in terms of McCarthy's job status. You know, everyone's been quiet on that front. You have Dak Prescott. You have a lot of people talking in terms of his job status. So I think it's certainly something to watch. But I'd be interested in knowing if Sean Payton would even take that job if offered, in terms of him wanting control and other things like that. So it could be a bunch of nothing. So we'll see.
Lastly, who's got more pressure tonight, Dak or Mike McCarthy?
Dak Prescott, I mean, Mike McCarthy's a solid coach. You know, things happen. He could find a new job, but when you spend 2 years talking about wanting to be paid like one of the highest paid quarterbacks when you've never been an All Pro, and the reference for people talking about how good you are goes back to your rookie year. That's a lot of pressure. So certainly Dak Prescott.
All right, he is the clean shaven. Well, I guess I can say cleaned up.
Yeah, I didn't get to that part. I didn't want to hold you up.
No, I appreciate. I work around your schedule, brother. I got plenty of time. Don't worry about it. Glenn Erby, give him a follow on Twitter at the Cover 2 NFL. Does a great job managing editor of the Eagles Wire USA Today. Fantastic follow on all social media. Great writer, covers the sport, knows it like the back of his hand. Appreciate you making time for a couple moments on BYP, pal.
I appreciate you, Rich Q. You know how we do, man.
All right, you got it. Be well.